welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Shagnon. I am part of the NABO headquarters team. Welcome to the third installment of the Women Mean Business International Forum. These webinars are designed to support the NABO Institute's mission to promote global expansion for women business ownership and to connect them with the resources for their success. The next installment will be March 27th, so jot that down on your calendar, to celebrate International Women's History Month. The NABO Institute's resources and certification program are open to all women business owners. You can find more about the NABO Institute on the nabo.org website. We want to thank our series sponsor Dell Technologies for making today possible. Dell is a strong supporter of NABO and the woman business owner community. NABO's partnership with Dell gives members access to exclusive discounts. The Dell Black Friday sale with the biggest NABO discounts of the year is happening right now until November 30th. So truly, please go check that out for all of your tech needs. You can visit dell.com/NABO and use the code NABOFY25 to unlock your savings. I promise I will put all of that in chat. For today's event, we will use the chat feature to comment, ask questions, and share your LinkedIn profile or contact information. Please, everyone, put your microphones on mute and remain muted throughout the panel discussion. And we will be asking questions at the end of each topic session, and we'll be asking everyone to please put those in chat, and I will be feeding those to the speakers. During our panel discussion, we will hear about the importance of learning culturally informed communication styles, why building trust is essential, and unique marketing perspectives to consider when engaging in global business. Our panelists will share insights and information from their personal experiences. It is now my absolute pleasure to pass the floor to our moderator, Samara Hakim, President and founder of Culture Grit LLC. For over a decade, Samara has equipped business leaders with the mindset and skills to work across cultures while mitigating bias in their business practices. Welcome, Samara.
Thank you, Tanya, and such a pleasure to be here with everybody. I love the turnout, or at least the registration that you said of 70 people, and I know folks are expecting this to be recorded and sent their way, so the level of interest is really exciting. We are, of course, going to be introducing our speakers, so if you can go to the next slide to have everybody go around and share a little bit about themselves before we get started on the questions. So we've got Connie Gonzalez, Irina Yashkova, and Chandler Martin. And I'll start with, I'll go kind of backwards. So Chandler, if you want to share first about yourself, then we'll go to Connie and then Irina.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Samara. Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a marketing advisor, and I'm a university lecturer. I teach in several different universities in both the US and in Western Europe. I currently live in the Netherlands. As a marketing consultant, I focus on go-to-market strategy for growing companies. And I've had a fairly diverse international career. A lot of my early career was centered around different countries in Latin America. I spent 15 years in beautiful San Diego, California, and now I live in The Hague, Netherlands. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chandler. Such a pleasure. And I've been a friend and a colleague with Chandler for many years, and definitely we miss you here in San Diego, Chandler. So Connie, off to you next.
Hi, thank you, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Connie Gonzalez. I currently live in Charlotte, North Carolina. However, I just moved back to the US last year after 20 years abroad in El Salvador and Costa Rica. So I also have a Latin America background. We'll connect Chandler on that later. I've worked with business school. I've worked with small artisans, so small business, mostly women in the region. And I've also worked for the US government. So kind of a variety of experiences. And with my current position, I am working in many countries around the world. My largest project that I'm working on right now includes 25 countries from Europe, Central Asia, and Africa.
Thank you, Connie. Irina.
Hi, my name is Irina Yashkova. It's really a great pleasure for me to be here before the National Association of Women Business Owners. That's very exciting. I was born and raised in Russia, Western Siberia, and I'm a third generation linguist. So my grandfather spoke 7 languages and he was adept in all different cultures. And then I always had an interest. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, I had the chance to come to California to study, get my master's in conference interpretation. So that's my profession. I'm working with Russian and English and also provide cross-cultural training and coaching to people. I've been lucky to have been supporting the International Space Station program for the last 26 years.
That will help a little bit. And it's an
That's
exciting
better,
project
Irina.
of
Thank you.
15 countries working and living together, and I mean, in space and on the ground. So I'm happy to share some insights from personal business as well as working for this international community. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Irina, and definitely we can hear you much better, and welcome all. So let's get started with our first question. Our first question is obviously about why we're having this conversation. So what makes this conversation so important to be having it at this time in our world of work? So I'll start. How about you get us started, Irina, and then we'll go to Chandler and Connie.
Yes, I think today we can't really discount cross-cultural communication because it's essential for modern managers. We live in an increasingly globalized and interconnected world, and we cannot just transport the managers from one culture to another. Just imagine having Japanese prime ministers functioning in the US. That will not happen automatically, or the US politicians in the Arab countries. So that probably they'll need some cultural consulting and coaching. So it's very important we take that into account. And I've just recently came back from Uzbekistan, where I could see the Silk Road, and I was amazed to see how so many centuries ago people knew about cross culture and they adapted their style to have a successful business. So in a way, today we live in a global Silk world, digitally, globally, and that's exciting. So we need to remember that.
Thank you, Irina. You want to build on that, Connie?
Yeah, excuse me. I think I completely agree with what Irina just said, and I won't repeat that. What I will say is with my current position with SIPE, we work with women in business around the world in a variety of different countries. And what we always hear is a great interest to build business to business connections and having those connections to expand their businesses within their countries, across borders to the neighboring countries, but also further away and abroad. And we find that they have very similar interests, very similar challenges, and are very, very interested to make those connections. So I think it's a great opportunity for NAWBO to also provide that type of support to their members who are interested in expanding their horizons abroad.
Love it. Chandler, on to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with everything that my co-panelists have mentioned. And I would just say that businesses are made up of people, and people just want to be understood. So if we're all here in this room, it's because we all share that same interest. So I think the more that we can try to understand where people are coming from, the better our odds are for success collectively. And looking at it at a more macro level, the world has a lot of conflict in it right now, really difficult, intractable conflicts. We have climate change, we have polarization, we have pandemics, wars, all the things that we're all aware of, and we all have to live on this planet together. So the more that we can try to understand each other and that we can break down these barriers and, you know, build understanding, you know, we can have a business acting as a force for good and for collaboration. So I think that's a way forward for us.
Thank you. I love how we went from the practical, pragmatic, transactional to also the, you know, the more emotional and sentimental and very much social issues we're dealing with. So let's talk a little bit, you know, we know the why. Let's talk a little bit about what you've seen. So what have you seen as the main impact for yourselves on your business from working internationally? And obviously beyond the customer acquisition goals that you had. So take us a little bit further. So maybe we'll get started with Connie, and then if you want to add on that, Chandler, and then Irina finally.
Sure. So I'll share from the perspective of what I've seen with the women in business that we've worked with. And I would say, again, kind of just emphasizing the point of there are many shared commonalities. And what we've seen from the women entrepreneurs groups is that they really appreciate opportunities to share their experiences and also learn from others. And because there are common challenges, they can say, oh, I'm having difficulty with navigating, the digital online technology space and taking my business online, for instance. And they very quickly, in having conversations with others, find that others have that same challenge. And then there's others who have great experiences with how they did it. And so having an opportunity to share and learn from each other I think, is very, very powerful. I think it's also very powerful that as we grow in this connected space, that there's opportunity to find that camaraderie, to build coalitions where you feel like you have others' voices alongside yours. And that provides a sense of authority and power and interest in making changes for the benefit of all women in business.
Chandler, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the room, a lot of women business owners, and so I would approach this from the angle of I think for many of us as entrepreneurs, a business is a vehicle for self-development, for personal development, and when you're being put up in an international context, and when you're coming up in contact with different ways of thinking and different ways of communicating. It can be, there's definitely a growth edge there because you have to really consider yourself and why do you act a certain way? Why does a certain thing trigger you? And so it's really an opportunity to grow as a person. And rather than saying, oh, that culture, the Dutch are rude because they're so direct. I live in the Netherlands, so that's my example. But, that's a very easy thing to say. But actually, can we really consider, is it okay, maybe because I'm socialized as a woman, I find it upsetting that people communicate very directly because we've been taught not to do that. So, you have these opportunities to really examine your own beliefs and your own socialization and consider perhaps other ways of doing things.
Yes, I don't know if you saw me, I was smiling at like all the things that are triggers because, that is what I usually coach people on is how to get past that. Love that one, Chandler. And thank you, Connie, about, both of you have talked about growth together and voices and self-development and new perspectives, which can help you with your business and develop. Irina, you've got your own business or businesses. So let us know what benefits you've seen.
Yes, and I think it's also important to remember when we talk about cross-cultural communication, it's not only dealing with people in other countries. I mean, in the US, we have different approaches and different communication styles if you look at the East Coast, at the West Coast, the North, the South, but also the way we communicate is even within your team, even if you don't have an international team, we communicate differently. And I'll give an example. We used to have a family business, which is an RV park and marina in a small village of Sneads Ferry, North Carolina. And coming from Houston of 4 million people, going to a small fishing village of 10,000 was a big change. And we were thinking how to grow our small family business. I mean, it's all about fishing. It's all about taking your weekends. And if you're familiar with an RV park, the economy of scale starts from 100 RV lots. So this is when you can generate enough revenue to pay for contractors and develop. Well, we had only 64 lots and we didn't have any more space to grow. So what did we start thinking for our small family business is to provide more services and better quality. So we made it a boutique hotel or boutique RV park. And all of a sudden, from a small fishing village, we got on a travel blog of some Swiss travelers. And they came, they enjoyed our Southern hospitality, and they started writing how it is great to come to the US from Europe, and everything is big. And we have big RVs, which are like moving hotels, and how great it is, and the fishing. So we partnered up with a local fishing charter. And we offered these unique opportunities, especially for women. I think sometimes we feel a bit shy, go and explore. We think we need to have a man to go fishing with us. We don't. We had a great captain. And then on our social media, we would have catch of the day. We'll show these travelers, we'll share the sudden recipes of cooking the fish, and then we'll recommend local calabash restaurants to them because it was all new. If you come from Switzerland or any other places, and then looking at what our travelers needed, we started partnering with local businesses, such as a massage therapist after a long transatlantic flight. So that's what they needed. We created a meditation garden. We recommended local breweries and the pirate festivals and the turtle clinic, which was important for the travelers to see. All of a sudden, our business tripled within a year and a half. And we couldn't believe it. Without expanding our business physically and investing in the construction, all of a sudden we put the Sneed's Ferry, this beautiful fishing village, on the world map. And I think that is one of the biggest impacts of speaking the language of your customers, whether they're from another culture or whether you bring the needs of the local customers. But I think that's one of the advantages of being culturally savvy.
Yeah, this is so great. All of you talked about the outcomes and you just what based on what you just said, Irina, speaking the language, and it's not the language as we think of language, it's also figurative, right? Speaking to their listening and their style. So let's go and kind of and look at how it all gets started, right? Which is adapting communication and also leadership styles. And of course, that is not lacking for misunderstandings that take place. So, what are some common misunderstandings that arise when leaders and business owners work across cultures, and how can they be avoided? And maybe I know Chandler, you've got some stuff to talk about that, and then Irina after that, and Connie, feel free to add as well if you like.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I would just say that going back to this idea of businesses being made up of people, that I think the number one, something very common that happens is just misunderstanding other people's motivations or understanding their values. So that goes back to not making assumptions, asking questions, doing research, and so on.
It sounds so basic, but you don't know how many people overlook that. It's very common to do that. All right, Irina. Any thoughts on this one?
Well, being a professional conference interpreter with the English and Russian combination, I'm amazed whenever I say that, and I'm going to say that only 7% of our communication is verbal. The rest is non-verbal, such as the tone of voice and the body language. So we need to be aware of when we communicate to other people, how we come across. So the first rule is know yourself, how you come across. The second one is know your audience. And the third one is adapt your communication style. When it comes to volume, it's not always means anger in other cultures. When you're a bit louder, sometimes it's excitement. So you need to understand that interruptions are not always a sign of being rude. Hierarchies is important. Personal space. When I work with expats, they would often ask me, Irina, we go to a store, there is a wide aisle, and people constantly cross it and say, excuse me, I'm sorry, and they don't even touch each other. So I have to explain it's a personal bubble we have in the US that people kind of come into your bubble without even touching you. They apologize, they acknowledge that they are close. Personal bubbles are different in different cultures. Silence is also very important. In the US, we don't like being quiet. In other cultures, it's a sign of active listening and emotion. And it can be an emotional response. So we need to be aware of that. Eye contact. In some cultures, it's okay to have a direct eye contact. In fact, if we don't have it, we think a person has something to hide. In other cultures, it's considered to be rude to stare. So you don't have a direct contact all the time. Physical appearance. We are communicating with the way we're dressed, the colors and everything. In Russia, there is a saying, a book is judged by the cover. And sometimes we'll say, well, but what's inside is more important. It's true, but we might not have a chance to get to the second page of knowing each other because we are still stuck at the first page of being judged by the cover. And I'll tell just one maybe story, if you allow me, Samara, of being aware about cultural implications. I was once interpreting for a top NASA official in Russia. His name was Rex. Well, the thing is, in Russia, every other dog's name is Rex. For some reason, people like the name Rex. And so, as he was about to come on stage, about 400 people, I was hesitating whether to tell him because I anticipated the reaction of the audience. Hi, my name is Rex. And then the audience is going to laugh and he'll be confused. So I come to him and I explain the cultural phenomena that for some reason people like to name their dogs Rex. And you know what? Him as being a modern, savvy, culturally very flexible leader, he adapted that. He came on stage and he said, "Hi, before I introduce myself, I'm going to assure you that you're going to remember my name. Maybe not speakers before me and maybe not all the speakers after me, but my name is Rex." And he gave his last name. So he took this cultural tidbit that I shared with him and took it to his advantage, adapting his communication instead of having an embarrassing moment. So I think it's very important when we deal with people and cultures and we communicate. Thank you.
Yes, that's awareness. I love the part about, we judge the book by its cover because you know the saying that we hear many times in our lives here in the US, it's you cannot judge a book by its cover. So it's the complete opposite of that. So hopefully the audience got a kick out of this one for those of you who did not know. I heard listening there and active listening. So I want us to really hone in on this one a little bit. What role does active listening play in cross-cultural leadership? Connie, you're a leader, you're navigating the world. You basically work primarily abroad and internationally as an organization. And if you could talk a little bit about that, your experience with that, and how it might look differently across cultures. Irina got us started on some things like interrupting and eye contact when listening and loudness and voice. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts as well.
Sure. What I would say on active listening is, besides the fact that it's just a very good management skill, and you will be more successful in life if you can actively listen to others and engage in those conversations that way. I think it's particularly important when you're going across cultures or if you're going across teams, and being very clear about what you're hearing and confirming that with them to make sure that the way that you receive the information, because of your culture, because of your biases, because of your because of the things that you don't know about the other culture and the things that can cause, that you receive the information that they really were trying to relay to you, and that you're both speaking the same language, so to say. And I think that it's very important, particularly as you're looking at these international settings, because you want to try to avoid those miscommunications that Chandler referenced earlier. And I can give an example that I work with a team where we have 7 people on our team, and we're all located in different places in Europe, in Africa, in Washington, D.C. And so it's a very international team, and I frequently come across the need to communicate very clearly, to say something and confirm that they've heard the message that I was trying to relay to them. And also, when they speak to me, I try to confirm back to them that I've heard what they're trying to say, and just making sure that we are all understanding each other. We also have, some people are native English speakers and some are not. And so respect for people who are trying to communicate in English when that may be their second or third language. And, word choice can make a difference. And just working in the conversation to not take offense by a word they might use, but to just confirm that what they're trying to say is really what I heard. So I think it's a great skill and very necessary to have successful business communications.
Thank you, Connie. And actually, you got us started on giving us some skills that our audience could have to develop for themselves if they are looking to become more culturally agile, more culturally responsive in their communication and leadership. So Irina and Chandler, Chandler, if you want to get us started, and then Irina after that, tell us some more about what you see as some skills for the audience to have. And if you are able to share, maybe how you've developed them for yourselves, that would be great, I think. Thank you.
Sure. Was I up first?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
it's okay. Like we can flow. You all don't have to always wait on me to tell you I love the respect, and we're really segmenting listening, that's for sure.
perfect. Yeah, so I would offer just a couple things to build off of what Connie and Irina offered. So one thing is speaking slowly and clearly, which I'm definitely guilty of that myself. I know I talk really fast, but as a native speaker, it's really imperative to slow down. And okay, I'm a little nervous, so but I realize, I mean, this is critical. And one thing I've definitely noticed on international teams is that oftentimes non-native speakers can communicate more easily with other non-native speakers, and they have a harder time understanding native speakers because we tend to speak really fast and we use a lot of idioms and jargon, and so we have to be mindful of that. So those are some things to be aware of, is avoiding over usage of idioms, avoiding excessive jargon and sports analogies. Americans love sports analogies, and other countries, other nationalities don't understand them. So being mindful of that, and also being aware of sort of international English or sort of like a neutral English. Those are all some tips, and it just takes a bit of practice.
Chandler, these are great tips that you have shared. I also will share a story and a tip with that. Um, we don't all communicate the same way. And so I was once working at the pipe making project in Houston, and we had the owners were Russian capital and the chairman was Russian. Then we had the CFO who was Chinese. We had the quality department, mostly Indian engineers, and we had the management was US. And then the line workers were mostly from Mexico. And so the turnover was 76%, and people were not communicating. So even interpreters did not last there. I was number 5 when they called me. And so when I started looking and observing and listening and attending the meetings, what I've realized, it's the same 5 people would always jump with the answers. And whereas the CEO would ask, what are the measures to save for savings for our company? We need to find $1 million by the end of the year. The same 5 would raise their hands and give the answers. The rest of the team was silent. So I was very curious about that. And I started talking to the team members who were silent, asking if they had any ideas. And they said, yes, we do. And I said, well, why don't you answer? And they said, well, nobody asked us. So as all business owners and as managers, we need to create opportunities to include everybody. And sometimes people think it's rude. If you were not being asked personally, why would I jump? I'm not different. I'm not better than any other one. So we create opportunities. I also call it the phenomenon called sparkling eyes. When you look at someone and you look at their eyes and you see they have something to say, but they're not volunteering, create an opportunity for that person, include them, and they might have some valuable ideas. And the example with this pipe making company was the CFO was working on this project of finding the savings, but nobody asked him. So when one night I asked him what he was working on, he brought a whole binder with tabs and calculations and matrices. And I was amazed. I was blown away by all the measures, saving measures he had. And I said, why didn't you volunteer? He said, nobody asked me. So I talked to the CEO and I said, you need to ask him during the next meeting. And he did. And his savings that he found, if they were to be implemented 100%, were $1,200,000. So that was amazing. By creating an open and inclusive dialogue, how your business can really improve.
Thank you, Irina. Those are great skills and tools, and I love everybody's stories so far. And so many of these forms of adapting and adjusting that you all talked about, whether verbal or nonverbal, really the ultimate goal here is to build these meaningful connections and foster trust. So before we get to that, I want to pause and check. Do we have any questions on what we've said so far, Tonya? Anything from the audience?
No questions so far.
All right. Well, hopefully they're thinking about them.
Mhm.
So let's let's talk about fostering trust. I think we'll transition a little bit here. You know, they're related, obviously. So maybe Connie, if you could get us started on this one. What are or what do you see as the unique challenges of building trust across cultures, especially when we think about remote work? And now, you know, you had moved and you're having your team and they're everywhere. Also, you talked about that. So remote work obviously is limiting these face-to-face interactions. So what are some unique challenges that you observe for building trust in these areas?
Yes, you have to be very purposeful about the trust that you want to build. And do that, I think, in a variety of ways, especially as, for instance, on my team, we're talking about people from different cultures, different ways of operating and doing business, different ways of mixing, you know, personal and professional spaces, for instance. And so just being very mindful, respectful, and inviting, and creating those opportunities, like Irina just talked about, like making the invitation, because some people will feel more hesitant and less inclined to just come forward with their ideas, which again, that's like a very American thing, I think, to just be in people's faces. But not all cultures are like that. And so creating safe spaces for people to voice their opinions or share their ideas, and then, you know, doing that active listening to validate the information that they're sharing with you. You know, I have a lot of experience working in Latin America, and I would say that in many of the cultures there, it is important to build personal relationships at the same time that you're building the professional relationship. So whereas Americans are less inclined, I think, to maybe share their personal and professional space, in Latin America, and again, these are kind of generalizations, but generally it's very important to develop that personal relationship. And in fact, you many times would not want to go into a meeting, even if it's a business meeting or a negotiation, like a business negotiation, just barge right in with your request or your ask or getting down to business without going through the process of having small talk, of building the relationship, of talking about people's families, of you know, talking about the topic of the day, whether it's politics or the environment or the weather or whatever else it is. And so and it was very important for me as I was operating in Latin America to find connections. My question that I always use is, where are you from? And then I can somehow usually make a connection of, like, I know somebody from there, or I've been there, or I've heard about it. And so that's tends to be my opening line in terms of building a connection with someone and starting to build that relationship of trust.
Yes, you're talking about this really important balance, right, between building rapport with people and that closeness and the connection, but also still maintaining these boundaries as professionals and these diverse settings. So I imagine, you know, this is also rooted in the concept of trust being different across various cultures. So maybe Irina, if you can share with us. What practical ways have you used also to foster trust, building on some Connie said, and how this concept of trust might differ from your observations?
That's a wonderful topic. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak on that. Yes, trust is the foundation of all the cultures. The way we see trust in different cultures, however, is based on the values for each culture. So I see Mona is present here. Hi, Mona. We're both trainers for the Richard Lewis model. So I'll briefly introduce that. If we look at all the cultures of the world, there are more things that unite us. And one of the great practical models that might be helpful is the Richard Lewis model, where he says all the cultures can be divided into three categories: multi-active, where the competence, reliability, the data is very important. Examples will be Germany, UK, US. So these are linear cultures. What's the bottom line when it comes to business? I'm as good as my word when we talk about trust. Then we have multi-active cultures, and Connie alluded to that, saying a lot of Latin American cultures, it's all based on personal relationship. And before you do business, you have to build some personal relationship to see whether you're a good person, whether you're worthy my time to sign a contract with you or even have a contract negotiations. So Latin American, Southern European, Middle East, and Finland I'm sorry, not Finland, multi-active cultures, India and Russia is a part of that. And when you look at reactive cultures, that is the Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and Finland, then respect, harmony, and patience are very important, and listening and silence. So based on these different characteristics, you build trust differently. So for linear cultures, you are consistent and punctual. You show that the time of your partner is important, and therefore you value their time. You focus on data and facts, and you keep your word. If you keep your word consistently, then they'll start trusting you, saying, yes, you are worth doing business. Multi-active cultures, as Connie and Samara was saying, building relationships is very important to maybe share a little bit, share your personal photos, share about your hobbies, about your family, show who you are as a person. When it comes to reactive cultures, show respect and show respect to authority as well. Be an active listener, be patient, and demonstrate long-term commitment. I've recently read an article about a hotel in Japan which is over 500 years old. So that's long-term commitment, showing that you are there to stay, and your reactive partners will be trusting you more. So this is in a nutshell about building trust across the globe.
Thank you. I do see that, Alexandra, you have your hand up, so we'd love to give you some space to share with us your question.
Thank you, Samara. Hello, everyone. I'm with the chapter of Silicon Valley, and I have a company, and we are going in the space of artificial intelligence, and we launched here in America, and now I'm from Chile, South America, but I also live in Germany, and we are exploring Poland because we have connections there for next year. So what are one of you, this is, I think, for Irina, what will be one of the things that you will consider in terms of differences, right? That we need to be aware when we move or we try to get our product of artificial intelligence there. What would be one advice that you will give?
That's a great question, Alexandra. Thank you. And that's bringing artificial intelligence into Chile in particular?
No, into Poland.
Oh, into Poland.
Yeah.
Poland, one of the multi-active cultures. So therefore, there will be a little bit of a mistrust at the beginning of who you are, whether they want to have any business with you. So building personal relationship will be very important, showing that you're committed, that the long-term relationships are very important. There will be some distrust maybe in the new legislature and stuff. So therefore, taking the time to explain how it is ethical to bring AI into that space and how it will be beneficial for the local community and economy probably would be important. And I think by having this global approach, instead of just having a transactional business, well, this is AI, this is how it's going to be, build a relationship first. I would say that probably, I don't know if Connie and Chandler would like to jump in and give some more advice and insights.
Yeah, and if you want to jump in and at all, yeah, Chandler.
Sure. I would just say this is a great example of an opportunity to do cultural research. So maybe I don't know specifically about what, how to respond in the case of Poland, but this is a great opportunity to, work with experts and definitely learn about things such as power distance, learn about things such as hierarchies, introversion, extroversion, how these different dimensions play out in a culture, because these are all things that are going to impact how people connect with each other. Is their context, is their culture high context, low context? Do people have a lot of hidden meaning behind what they say? Or do they just say what they mean? Are they able to say no? A lot of cultures don't say no, right? They'll say anything except for no. So it's like learning these kind of things. So yeah, great example of doing your cultural research. So good times ahead.
Yeah. I want to add something there because I'm seeing a theme happening here. So, for everybody, the caution here is not to overgeneralize either, right? So while that's why we do the research, we have local contacts, but it's important to also focus on the individual that is with you, the actual point of contact for you that you're dealing with, because you'll be surprised they do not always represent the generalizations. We may have these shared patterns of behavior and beliefs and habits. So it's good to maybe start as these things, you can have them in your back pocket, you know that you're likely to face them, but then making sure that you're actually giving a chance for the individual to show you who they are in front of you. And I love the piece that were both of you, Irina and Chandler, you were talking about some really important terms of art. So I would love us to clarify for the audience some words. So when we say, just for everybody, high context and low context, we're talking about like how direct, how indirect you are. When we're talking about power distance, that is hierarchy versus egalitarianism. And then, Irina, you explained the various categories as well of the cultures and what they mean. So I want to make sure that the audience, if you hear something, you're curious about it, any word, and you hadn't heard it before, please let us know, and our speakers are ready to explain. Do you all think we're ready to transition a bit to the next segment? Yeah? Okay. Yes, Elizabeth has talked about the culture map by Aaron Mill. Yes, I'm familiar with that, and I would say, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I am a fan of cultural intelligence as well, so I'm going to put in a plug for that. We are not going to leave you all leaving before we talk about some tools and resources at the end that you all can have and start digging into. So that's coming your way no matter what. So if your questions are around this, just know that answer is coming from all the speakers. Okay. We're talking about fostering trust and relationships. We talked about different styles, how people are coming across to us, how we're perceiving them. Some of you talked about some missteps already where maybe trust was gone or was eroded because people didn't do what you all are recommending to do. Anybody wants to share on that? Maybe Chandler, I know you've got stories. Do you have something where you can share what happened and how trust may have been eroded, but maybe restored? Anything like that?
I mean, nothing too juicy, but I can just say that I've seen it very frequently where in Latin America, because as most people know, people in Latin America, the business culture it's pretty flowery. So when you write an email, you have like your introduction, it's very flowery. And of course, countries are different. I'm not saying that all Latin America is the same, but generalizing broadly. And so I definitely have seen it, where the American style of like, okay, we're gonna do this, boom, 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 ABC, and like bullet points and just sending emails that are super to the point. I've definitely seen it offend some stakeholders, especially when money is involved. Like if you're, invoicing or asking for money or donations or things like that, where a little bit more of a delicate approach would be expected in Latin America. So yeah, I've seen that kind of play
That's a
out that way.
great one. That's a great example. I will say also in other parts of the world I've seen. So I'm Lebanese heritage, and that, the flowery piece of the language really resonates. But it's really what you're talking about is this idea of the basic of, I hope this message find you well, all in your loved ones and things like that, which I already know that some people in the world of work have complained about that to me. Like they want the complete opposite. Could they just get to the point? And the sentences at the end of, I am looking forward to our next connection. Feel free to reach out anytime. All these things, million thank yous, sincere regards, and the various greetings as if you're writing a formal handwritten letter, as if like when we learned how to do pen paling back in elementary school for some of us, they do not connect with that. So that is actually a pretty juicy example, I would say, even though you didn't call it that, Chandler. I'm staying with you for a moment, Chandler, because we're jumping to marketing next. But I want to pause again and check if there are questions coming to us. Tanya, anybody, or did I miss somebody's hand up?
No questions. You can move forward. You guys are doing a great job. Just a reminder, we have about 6 minutes remaining.
We do? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Did I miss your chat? All
You
right, thank you. And talk about cultural differences right there for you, the concept of time. So let's talk about marketing a little bit. And with that, with marketing, there's also it weaves into some things around negotiations as well and operations. So feel free to blend that together if you need to. So Chandler, what are the main considerations that people should be aware of when they're marketing to a global audience or in a market outside their home country?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the number one thing is to remember who your audience is and know your audience, because so often, and this isn't only in a global context, but this is just in general, so often people will hand something over the wall to the marketers and say, okay, go market this. And they really mean, go sell this for me. And what we are really talking about is taking that step back to understand truly marketing principles. Who is my audience? What resonates with them? What are their values? What is the context that they're operating in, to make sure that the product or service that you're trying to sell to them actually resonates. So really having your foundational marketing principles in place.
Love it. Anyone wants to add to that, Connie or
Can jump in if you like with another example. And I see Vika Rudneva online. Hi, Vika. So probably I would assume you're from the former Soviet Union and know your audience. And that's, Chandler, the great advice. When we talk about smile in different cultures, in the US, smile is neutral. In Russia, no smile is neutral. So sometimes people say, why are the Russians not smiling? Because that's a neutral expression. So when McDonald's came to Moscow, the first time, it was, I believe, in 1992. So the US protocols, and it was actually a Canadian franchise that came to Russia, to Moscow, but they used the smile. And that was a request, a requirement. As you come in, everybody says, welcome, smile. And the Russians were very suspicious coming into the shop saying, what are they smiling about? What are they hiding? So McDonald's in Russia had to adjust the protocol for the first time in the world to require not to smile of the staff who were working there. And that's one of the great examples of cultural adaptation. Know your audience, because that they were losing trust. And then maybe they relax, but I don't know. But at the beginning, that was very important. So that's one example I wanted to share. Know your audience. Very, very good tip.
Yes, and that actually kind of, relates to localizing, right? So I'm going to ask Connie to jump in on this one. So Connie, maybe could you give us examples of, or an example of a company that did localization well and adapted their messaging, knowing their audience?
Sure. I can give two quick examples. One is a large corporate. I'm not speaking on behalf of Pizza Hut, but what I experienced with Pizza Hut in the US and in El Salvador is very different. So in the US, Pizza Hut, you go to get pizza. And in El Salvador, you would go to Pizza Hut to have breakfast on Sundays. And that's kind of what they did. And their breakfast menu was extensive. And it fed to the local culture of, on Sundays, you have family meals, and going out to breakfast or like a brunch is a great way to have everyone in the family meet up and share a meal, which of course is a very bonding experience for people. So that was a really interesting example of how the brand changed based on the local needs and the local interests. Another one is when I was working with women artisans in El Salvador. It's going the other way, but they had a painted project, painted wood as one of their crafts, and it was very bright colors, looks like rainbows with red, orange, yellow, green. And the US market at the time was the color trends were way more neutral. And so the designers worked with the artisans to create a whole line of products that were just wood stained and then had silver accent colors on them. So it was completely different painting style. And I don't know that they would have come up with that on their own, but it was very much tailoring their specific product to the market that they were trying to export to.
Yeah, so how we talked about big companies and also we're talking, with folks here or with small businesses. So how much of a factor does budget play when we're trying to take a business internationally? Chandler, maybe you could get us started on this one since you work with organizations and companies to help support them.
Yeah, sure. I would say that it depends entirely on what kind of company you have. So
It depends,
it
yes.
depends. It depends. But I would say like for a solo consultant who's marketing on LinkedIn and getting referrals through your network, it would cost very little. You could just essentially tweak your LinkedIn messaging and attend some webinars such as this one, attend some international conferences with NALBO, for example. But companies that are product companies, they have a lot more operational complexity. They have supply chains to consider. It's a whole different question, import, export. So, and if you look at like the extreme end of that, you have something like McDonald's, which is tailoring its menu in every single country around the world. And even the restaurant decor is different. So if you go to McDonald's in, France, it's like pretty nice, pretty upscale. So, yeah, and they have entire teams of people that do localization. So, yeah, it really depends on what kind of business you have.
Yeah, and yeah, the team makes a big difference, I'm sure, as well. Connie, would you like to build on this one? I know you manage quite a budget and also being mindful of the source of the budget too.
Yeah, I think definitely it's important to consider your budget as you're considering expansion abroad, especially, and again, as Chandler's saying, it depends on what type of business you are, or what product perhaps that you have. But thinking about things of the cost of doing business in that new country. So things like if you need licenses, if you need registration processes, having perhaps legal staff. If you're planning on hiring employees, you would need to be making sure that you're compliant with local labor codes and laws, things like that, regulations. So all of that can have an implication on your budget and how much money you would need available to make sure that you're operating within a compliant space, right? And getting your product there or your service there, and then also adapting it. There would be a marginal cost to adapt your product to the local market, whether it's translation because you need the label in a different language, or whether it's how you're what it might actually look like, or maybe the packaging is different, is like a smaller size or multi-pack or something. So all of those things need to be considered as you're transitioning your product or your business from just one market to an international space.
All right, thank you, Connie. And so far, you've all given us some amazing tips and shared so many stories. Some people are wondering where to get started from where they're sitting in the world. You talked about, making connections with locals. We touched on that. But if you could build on this, so this is for everybody. This is kind of our final question. Give us some tools, practices, resources, things that people can write down right now that can help them to improve their effectiveness to do business across cultures. So maybe we'll start with the Chandler, then go to Irina, and then Connie.
Yeah, so I want to echo what one of our colleagues said in the chat, the Culture Map by Erin Meyer. Fantastic book, and it's really good for contextualizing how culture A or country A interacts vis-a-vis country B, and not making it a judgment of right or wrong, just understanding, how we relate to each other. So yeah, great resource.
All right, Irina.
Being a professional interpreter, I would say when you go to an international market, when you go to another country, don't be shy to hire professional interpreters. These are your ambassadors for the culture. They'll adapt your message accordingly. They will make sure that the message across travels across the cultures. And bilingual employees are not interpreters, so they cannot be used. And I think that's a mistake a lot of businesses do by thinking, well, I have already this engineer who speaks both languages. Why do I need to hire a professional interpreter? I would say hire professional interpreters every single time. And when it comes to resources, I mentioned the Richard Lewis book, and I'll show it to you, When Cultures Collide. It's been published, and I mean, I don't get the commit. Oh, Mona is showing her volume also. It's been published in 1 million copies in 27 languages across the world. It looks big, but 2/3 of it is a reference. So, and I don't get a commission for advertising this book. I just think it's a very practical, simple tool to use to understand other cultures.
Thank you, Connie.
I would suggest that you reach out to your networks, and they might have connections in the country that you're looking to expand your business to, and they might also have their connections or their networks who might have connections. So word of mouth and asking around is a great way to get access to people, to resources, to networks. I could also suggest reaching out to local business associations in those countries. So for instance, when one of the colleagues mentioned Poland, and she works in Silicon Valley, thinking about women's business associations in the technology space who would be connected with what's going on in the country, would know the legislation, would know the operating environment, would have local members perhaps who would actually be interested in making those business-to-business connections and could help foster that connection across the culture, across the borders. So I think that can be another resource and a starting point.
Thank you all so much. We are right there on time, and I know Tanya needs to wrap us up. Hopefully, people will connect with you. Put your LinkedIn information as well. You can find me all as well on LinkedIn. Tanya, if you want to give us a wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was incredible, and the resources you provided today are always so valuable. The conversations and networking will continue throughout 2025 at NABO's International delegations. Let me share my screen so you can see when those are coming up. And here we go. In July of 25, it will be the Global Summit of Women in Berlin, Germany. And then FCEM World Congress in Athens, Greece, November 4th to 7th. And MEXME is National Congress in Cancun, Mexico, August 27th to 29th. Everyone is invited to join, and you can email Becky Reagan at NABO HQ for more information. And then I wanted to make sure we cannot forget NABO's upcoming 50th anniversary celebration here in Washington, D.C. The Women's Business Conference is June 5th to 8th. We are offering one-time deep savings when you take advantage of Teal ticket pricing before November 30th. And y'all, November 30th is going to be here before we know it. So please go to nabo.org on the events page and learn more information. And this brings us to the close of our Women Mean Business International Forum. We are grateful for you being with us today and sharing your stories, insights, and connecting with one another. We want to again thank our sponsor, Dell Technologies, and Sarah for their unwavering support. And until next time, we wish you all prosperity and success. And I hope everyone has a super wonderful day. Have a great day, everybody, and thank you again for joining us.